Want to get rich playing video games?
Has anyone ever told you you've got serious anger issues?
Yes, what is up with that?
It's not out of the question that you might have a very minor case of serious brain damage.
Now this I can do.
I want your damn lemons! What am I supposed to do with these?
I used to be an adventurer like you. Then I took an arrow in the knee.
Then I took an arrow in the knee.
Then I took an arrow in the knee.
In the knee.
In the knee.
In the knee.
Please welcome your next panel's moderator, Todd Harris.
All right, gang. How's everybody doing today? We good? Nice. You survived hurricanes and chemical spills, and I'm glad you're here. We do have a rock star panel, and we're talking about an amazing industry, which is gaming. This is not gambling that sometimes uses the word gaming. We're talking about video games. So video games, as you guys probably know, the largest entertainment industry on planet Earth. As big as the film and music industry combined, $200 billion in revenue, and about 3 billion gamers on planet Earth. It's also the most fun industry to work on in planet Earth. I mean, our job is literally to make fun. That is the job description when you are a gamer or an event organizer. So I really look forward to this panel. We are gonna cover a little bit around what it's like and what the future looks like in terms of making original game content, in terms of building audience around video games and businesses around those communities, what the investment and funding landscape looks like. And then I also hope I give each of you at least one takeaway, whether you're a gamer or an investor or a potential founder around the game industry. So my name's Todd Harris. I'll be your moderator today. I enjoyed the FinTech panel. I spent the first 15 years of my life in FinTech at NCR, Radiant Systems, and Blue Cube. Then I got to develop original video games for about 15 years at Hi-Res Studios. We made the game Smite. Any Smite players out there? All right, we got one right next to me, cool. And now I'm also involved in gaming as a media property with Skillshot and Ghost Gaming and a few other things. I'd like this panelist to spend a few minutes, each person, introduce yourself, please, talk about your background in gaming or what got you to where you are, and then what you're currently focused on with your company. So we'll start right here.
Is this on? Yeah, it is. Okay, great. I'm Mike Doyle. I am currently the head of external development and partnerships for Daybreak Gaming. I am also the general manager of Coldiron Studios. We are currently working on a project for Disney at the moment, due out next summer. I'm formally legally trained. I got into video games in the classic sort of it's not what you know, it's who you know. A good friend of mine was an executive producer, and when I had moved back from Toronto, I'm Canadian by birth, said, hey, have you ever thought of getting involved in the video game industry? And I was like, no. I was looking to work, I'd been working at a big corporate firm in Toronto and hated my life, and I thought, I'm gonna go work for a little boutique firm and have a lot of client-facing time and stuff. So point being is I took him at his word, and I started almost 20 years ago at Relic Entertainment working on Company of Heroes and Dawn of War, and that really started this odyssey that I've been on ever since, which led me through Electronic Arts Need for Speed, THQ working on UFC and WWE, Infinite Game Publishing, some titles there, vice president at Atari, the head of interactive at 20th Century Fox. I did the Dubai VR theme park. I worked at Hinterland Games on The Long Dark, and then most recently, obviously, I've been at Daybreak Games, so that's what I do now.
Awesome. Thank you. Allie?
Normally when I introduce myself, I don't have as many credentials, so it's going to be short. My name is Allie Young. I'm president of the Gamehers, which is the largest community for women in the video game industry. We're a global platform that spans across 1.3 million in total reach. As Todd said, 3 billion gamers in the world. Half of them are actually women.
Clap that up, yes. So my name is Titus. I'm CEO and founder of the UEL. We are the largest multi-genre gaming league in the world. And we host basically like the UFC of video games, for short. I actually started in real estate. I did real estate development for about 8 years and built communities, anything from a 10-home community all the way up to what's called a super community, a 2,000 home community. So I always like to say I'm great at building communities, and then what I do is sell access to those communities.
I'm Andrew Greenberg. I have been making my living making games since 1990. I'm also the executive director of the Georgia Game Developers Association. We represent more than 500 game developers around the state, including some of the biggest companies we'll probably talk about later. And I got into the industry because I was a reporter at the legal affairs paper here in town, the Daily Report, writing about lawyers. And sorry, Matt and the other lawyers, I got tired of writing about lawyers and started writing about vampires instead, and just went with it from there.
Cool. My name is Ryan Broussard. I am the VP of Sales and Production Incentives at Wrapbook. If you don't know what Wrapbook is, we are the next standard when it comes to finance and accounting in the entertainment industry, which does include the digital world and digital content, which I'm extremely happy to say. We have many clients in this field, and we are working with those clients to alleviate their friction-filled days by being the force multiplier that gives them greater speed, confidence, collaboration, and answers than they've ever received at any of the archaic payroll companies or accounting companies that are out there. And we're doing this with next-gen technology and concierge service and a rapid pace of innovation. Personally, I've been in this space for about 16 years, and I was floored, because I'm a huge gamer personally, when I found out in this production payroll space that we like to call it, that we started actually paying and doing stuff for video games, gaming, and esports stuff. So I couldn't believe when some of my favorite IPs were coming across my desk of like, hey, we need to pay this voice talent, we need to pay these crews for the esports stuff, setting up all the stages and everything there. I just couldn't believe that I could be a part of it, because so much of what I was doing was in television and movies, and I was so happy to see that the digital world, especially video games, was a huge part of that pie.
Awesome. It's a good group, right? Yeah, these are rock stars. And so we're going to touch on original IP that Ryan mentioned in a minute. But before we go there, Andrew, I'd like to start with you. Maybe just give a little bit of a history lesson of gaming in Atlanta and Georgia. We're at the Atlanta World Summit. Obviously, gaming has risen. You've seen where it was and where it is now. So maybe share with folks a little bit about that growth that we've seen.
Yeah, like I said, I've been doing this since 1990, so there's been a lot of interest in Georgia in game development that entire time. However, and a lot of talent. However, there's not been a lot of money in the areas for bizarre reasons. So growing into the late 90s, we started to see a lot of interest in all areas of technology. Turner Interactive started up, a number of other game companies, including my own, Holistic Design, were going on here. And then the recession of 2000 pretty much wiped it all out. There were 2 studios left in the state. My own, a fellow named Dave Bradley, who had Heuristic Park. But we had great growth between 2000, when we had 2, and 2005, we grew to 5 studios. And that's when the state stepped in and said, well, we've got this Entertainment Investment Act. Let's have it apply to films and games, also known as interactive productions. And then we saw the growth. And it's exploded since then. Todd mentioned Hi-Res Studio, their awesome game Smite. They're now working on Smite 2. Has been a leader in that. They have hundreds of people working for that company now. We have Tripwire Interactive with Killing Floor. They're working on Killing Floor 3 now. They just released a great pirate game called Rogue Warders. They've got 100 people here working. Ubisoft, which is a giant international publisher, has a group here called Blue Mammoth that does, yay, the Brawlhalla stuff you're wearing today. Check them out in November at their Brawlhalla Championship. And great team here. We've got great VR groups like PulseWorks, There are now almost 200 studios around the state. And a lot of that can be credited to the state's foresight in including games as entertainment. We didn't want to just be the entertainment capital for 20th century entertainment. We wanted to be forward-thinking, moving to the 21st century, and that's paid great rewards. And the studios are all over the state. The state continues to take a strong interest in it. Todd and I both serve on the governor's Film, Music, and Digital Entertainment Advisory Board to help guide where all of this will go. The schools continue to have strong interest. I'm sure we'll talk more about the education side, but the growth has been massive. We have thousands of people now working in the industry instead of the barely 100 we used to have.
Yes, so from 2 to over 200, pretty impressive. And then, of course, you mentioned a lot of IPs, original properties, Smite, Brawlhalla, Killing Floor, more that were birthed here. And that's, one of the trends that we've seen. It might have been 20 years ago if someone was thinking of doing entertainment, they'd think about making an original movie and maybe do a small game as an add-on. But that was before Super Mario Brothers and The Last of Us. It was before these gaming IPs have become the largest traditional media properties. So, Michael, you have a history of a lot of original IP creation. Maybe just speak a little bit about this phenomenon of, existing IPs coming into games or new IP being created by games and what you see that looking like in the future.
Sure. Why I was so excited about attending this particular summit, was the idea that it's one of the first times where I've really seen the blending of all these different media spheres together. And I say that simply because I had the experience firsthand of being an executive at Fox for years. And that was at a time where we were very successful as the interactive group. I mean, we were releasing games that were, highly rated and very well loved by consumers and financially successful. And mostly they didn't care, right? Because we were not films. And, the part that really struck me notably, I always like to use the example to speak of a non-original IP, but I like to use the example of Alien because I've worked on Alien so frequently. I think I've worked on 5 Alien projects. And the real takeaway about it was, and it was one of the things that was surprising and very enlightening to me, was that after we did Alien Isolation, when it came out, it won PC Game of the Year, it was heralded as one of the great Alien experiences. Years later, when you're on Reddit or when you're following these community threads, a very common comment that you hear is that for people that love Alien as an intellectual property, their top 3 are Ridley Scott's first movie, James Cameron's second movie, and Alien Isolation, the video game. And the epiphany that's drawn out of that insight is really material to the future of entertainment in a place like Atlanta. And that is that people, young people in particular, are viewing these things as experiences, not as silos. So it's not, oh, I like the film, but I hate the video game. They're all variants of the Alien universe. And moreover, the part that we're seeing now is that they're symbiotic and they're self-reinforcing. And what I mean by that is you just saw Alien Romulus came out and it was remarkably successful. Well, we saw Coldiron Studio. I'm the general manager of Did Aliens Fire Team Elite a number of years ago, where we were looking at our Steam data and all of a sudden we see a pop in sales. You're seeing the exact same thing in the symbiotic ecosystems that exist around TV shows like The Last of Us, the release of movies like Sonic the Hedgehog. You're seeing really material increase. So the point being is that these industries historically not only have looked like, but have behaved like competitional silos. And the truth is that they're Venn diagrams and they're increasingly becoming unified ecosystems. And the last piece I would say, to answer your question is, I really do think that original IP is the future, right? That's the future of games. We can continue to do licensed IP, and I'm working on licensed IP right now. They're a great bread and butter aspect of the industry, but when you're talking about building grassroots value, it comes out of that original IP, the creativity that comes. And now that Hollywood is understanding that video game IP is an entirely viable source of original IP, going forward, that's going to become much more of that ecosystem.
Yeah, I think it's a huge opportunity for our region and people here. Again, we kind of have a reputation in making films of being the main manufacturing center of films, but not necessarily creating the IP here, the screenwriting, et cetera. And so with this new form of media, we've got an opportunity with games and film and anime and comics to be a center of creating this transmedia. So great points about making games. We also have some people here that are involved in building and growing, I would say, audience around games. So first of all, how many people are gamers? Raise your hand if you are a gamer. Okay, and then if you didn't raise your hand for that, are you a parent of the gamer? Okay, so that's everybody in the room. You're all gamers or parents or siblings of gamers, right? So you kind of get it, and obviously we have to say it, that some people not only enjoy playing games, but watching other people play games, which is another level of building business and engagement, esports or live streaming. So I think I'll start maybe with you, Titus, and then go to you, Allie, around just talk a little bit about, I guess, start with, let's call it traditional esports and how that grew an audience around gaming, and then talk about what you're doing particular to your gaming league to potentially grow it even further.
Sure. So I think the original idea around esports started somewhere in like the 80s, 70s, 80s, something like that, where they went to a college and they were trying to promote the game. And so they spent a lot of effort and energy marketing to the students, hey, we're going to do a competition around this game. And that was known as like the first official esports event. And that hasn't really changed much. It hasn't evolved since then. The idea of promoting the game through competition, getting a bunch of people together and playing that game has kind of been how esports has evolved over time. And I think talking about IP, a lot of the issues that surround that are the leagues that are created and developed by people like me or Allie growing her community aren't owned because that intellectual property is not yours. And so it makes it very difficult to be able to build something that you can own, control, and that can kind of pass on to the next generation. Understanding that the intellectual property that comes with games kind of has its ebbs and flows. Every game is going to be popular and then eventually will no longer be popular. And your entire business, if it surrounds that game, your business will also grow in popularity. And then when the game dies, so does your business. And so that is essentially why I created my business the way I did, understanding that gaming as a whole is not going anywhere, though every game might, right? Like every game I think will live and die. That's just a belief that I have. You may not believe it, but it's kind of how it works. It's just art, and our kids and their kids won't be playing the same games that we're playing right now. And so what we tried to design, or what we designed, is a competition that surrounds gaming as a whole and building a community that's entire process is about being the best well-rounded gamer across all genres of games: fighting games, sports, shooting, racing, and strategy games. And then hosting one single competition where you're going to determine who's the best, right? Again, thinking UFC of gaming. And what that allows us to do is not only go with the ebbs and flows of the new games that are coming out, but also find interesting and cool games to introduce to our community and bring our community in to see new games that are coming out, as well as bigger games that are maybe already popular. And kind of opening, the average gamer actually plays 24 games a year. So it's not really doing anything different than what the audience already wants. It's just kind of opening eyes to the next generation of gaming. Whereas, back in the 70s, there was one game, right? Or two games, right? But now, since 2020 to 2024, there's been over 500,000 games developed. And so that's, you're doing 600-700 games a day being released. And so finding ways to market those games and advertise those games is what we specialize in.
Excellent. And then, Allie, you mentioned almost half of gamers are female. Most people don't realize that. Maybe they're not the ones that are as often on the stages competing or other things. So talk about how you're looking to reach and grow and foster that audience with gamehers.
So Mike had talked about IP and how entertainment as a whole has bled into game development. Titus has talked about how his company is the UFC of esports, right? At the end of the day, gaming is all about community. I met my husband playing video games over 20 years ago. And for me, it was always, the 300 people I killed dragons with every night, right? And so with that in mind, going into what the gamehers is all about, as a human, I go and I love the UFC, right? I love watching UFC. I love the Braves. I love the Falcons. I also go to a shit ton of movies, right? And so, when you think about what you do as a human being, like you're not a movieist. You're not you just go to a movie. Same thing with gaming. You're a gamer, but you might not identify as one. It's funny, I was in Lagos, Nigeria, and talking to a diplomat, and he came up to me and he said, Allie, it's really interesting what you do. I'm not really a gamer. I only play Call of Duty like 3 or 4 nights a week. And I was like, bro, you're a gamer, right? And so when you think about community and you think about how you're reaching, audiences for traditional sports, audiences at the movie theaters, they're all trying to see how they can incorporate and integrate gaming into what they're doing, because they realize that the new audiences, Gen A's, Gen Z's, and the new generation of entertainment acquisitions. I'm an entrepreneur, so I think of that. You're looking at people who are human beings. And so however you reach those humans are really how you're going to build those communities up.
Yeah, it's a great point. You touched on a couple of things there. One is community building, which is so important to every game. And I would say most businesses certainly are leaning into community building. So I'm gonna return to that. Everybody be thinking about what they're doing that they might share in terms of just community building for your own businesses or IPs. But before we get to that, I want to hit Ryan, because we need to talk a little bit about money, because we have these great ideas. We want to build these great communities, and it takes hard work. It also takes money. So you have this view, and we can talk about tax incentives and we can talk about investment. Before we get to investment, you have a unique view of what different states are doing. Andrew spoke about some programs specific to Georgia. So if you don't mind, describe the landscape of how different states see entertainment and interactive entertainment, gaming specifically, and just what you're seeing out there as a trend.
So as I mentioned, part of my title is production incentives, and a lot of the success that you guys have built with Georgia, as you mentioned, is because of the production incentives that are built into the state. Many states have production incentives, which are used to what they feel is to better the economic impact of a certain industry. In the past, as I was kind of talking about at the beginning, it's always been seen as film and television. As the years have gone, I can't believe I've been doing this for almost 2 decades. As the years have gone on, I have seen a shift, thankfully, that door is starting to open, and open pretty broad, pretty big for digital. They're starting to write in the actual bills and the legislations for these incentives words like interactive, digital, VR is listed quite a few times, video games, voiceover. Things that were never there before, and it was just categorized as straight up traditional film, traditional television. I don't need to go into Georgia because Todd and Andrew can speak so much about that. It's obviously a well when it comes to the incentives for video games, and people recognize that. So much so that other states are starting to see this and follow suit. North Carolina, hopefully they can get back on their feet with everything going on, but the film industry is a big part of their economy, and they actually have now an esports division of their incentive. It's completely carved out for esports directly with Raleigh. And New Jersey recently have divided up their incentive, their classic film incentive. Now they have a digital incentive that mirrors that film incentive. And we're going to start seeing this in more and more states. I think more and more governors and legislative officials are starting to realize the impact that, as you mentioned, a community can build. It's great to have a community. It's great to have people. I'm part of that community. It's even better to see there's money behind that community, right? And that there's money there to be had, that you can grow this. Look at a film nowadays, and I'm not here. I talked to a colleague before I got here, and he's like, so are you just going to kind of, bash film? And I said, no, not at all. I'm here to rise up video game and gaming and digital because I feel like it's on the cusp of being on that same plateau. And we're going to see more and more people recognize that, hey, a film can kind of peter out on the screen after like 3 weeks, whereas the longevity of a video game that has union talent, that has SAG talent, that has crews that work with it, that an esports thing that travels the world and has a whole crew that's putting up those stages and those lightings and those gripping. And those are the types of people that I see are getting paid. This is real money. This is a real salary that normal everyday people are getting because of this industry. And it's so crucial to recognize that.
Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, I think, props to Sarah for putting together this conference that brings together all these silos. And I think Andrew would agree that what we've seen over the last 3 years is candidly, there was a lot of silos between, let's say specifically film and music and gaming. And definitely those industries are working together now. And it's probably not a coincidence because the skill sets are also more common. Film is using the Unreal Engine that gaming uses to put virtual sets up. And so music cuts through every form of media. So as the workforce needs become similar and the state really cares about jobs, these incentives help. So let's return to community a bit. Certainly when I was at Hi-Rez, we aspired to be the most community-oriented developer there was. We fell short a lot of times, but with games moving from being a product you buy once to something that's updated online, a lot of times the community wants to get involved in the process. Certainly if you're running an esports league or building an organization, the community is involved. So this will just be for anyone who wants to take it and contribute like one specific thing that you are doing with your business that has been helpful in growing community. Because without relevancy and attention, we're all just, doing something for ourselves. So anyone who wants to share, I think, Allie, go for it.
Actually, I'm going to plug Atlanta.
Okay.
Because I live here. The ecosystem here is incredible. When you talk about funding, when you talk about capitalization of businesses that are in gaming and esports, capital is extremely important, and also the ecosystem around your business. And so for me, as an entrepreneur, I didn't want to build my business anywhere else but Atlanta because of the strength of the ecosystem. I mean, at any point in time, I could go to Andrew and be like, hey, how are those tax incentives coming along, right? Or I could go to Todd and be like, hey, what's going on with bringing in more of the bigger events and studios? And so I think that community also has to have an ecosystem behind it, because without that, the communities will peter out.
Yeah, it's a great point. Very collaborative vibe here, certainly, compared to some other markets. And a plug. Titus, did you have something?
Yeah, I would say one thing that we do really well is understand and appreciate diversity. There's a ton of diversity in gaming, but it's still, each game kind of still has its silos because certain types of people like certain types of games. And so because our competition is surrounded around gaming as a whole, not only do you, if you have a teammate that is different than you and plays different games than you, not only do you have to appreciate that person, or you don't just have to tolerate that person, but you have to also appreciate and understand them, because they're going to teach you the skills that you may not have, and then you're going to be able to, in turn, teach them those skills. And so the community is very collaborative in that way, because naturally they are different. They play different games, different styles of games. And so them being able to collaborate and truly appreciate each other's differences is something that really makes my community very different than any other siloed gaming experience.
Yeah, great. Look at that. In game development, we've long talked about delivering a fun play experience, but over time we've come to realize that's not what really makes a game successful. What makes a game successful is how well it delivers a community and what that community means to people. Allie already gave us a great example of that. And I'm amazed at the gamer communities, how dedicated and how supportive they are. There's this image that thankfully is going away of them being the opposite of that, but the communities are great. So I've just released a 25-year anniversary version of one of my older games because the community had kept it alive for so long. Emperor of the Fading Suns, you can wishlist it on Steam right now. But it's also that the whole format of the industry supports teamwork and community building. When Todd does an esports event and brings these teams together, the most important skill they have to have is not headshots, it's how well can they work with a team, how well can they be part of an active community. And that's what the teams have. They have these communities following them and they work actively to build them. So more and more we see this as the core element of what makes successful games, successful esports, successful game communities. I actually disagree with Titus, who said these games go away. My experience is they don't. The game I first released in '91 still has a huge community, as do the ones I've been doing ever since.
Great. Thanks. Okay, I'm going to return to investment. So Ryan, you described this landscape of potential tax incentives. Sometimes that plus the money in your pocket is not enough. You're looking for external capital. And again, I would say maybe 10 years ago, that was very foreign to a venture capitalist or someone else that might want to back something. So, Michael, maybe I'll start with you, and then for anyone else that wants to, just what is the landscape for someone out there that is an investor and they understand that gaming just keeps going like this, even though other industries do not? What would you tell that person around how they should think about, potentially investing into the ecosystem?
Sure. I think the good news is what we're seeing increasingly now is a participation in gaming through far more conventional modes of funding than historically was the case. And it made sense. It's a lot like the suspicion or the reticence that there was of, Hollywood movie studios and the movie making and TV making. They were reticent about gaming. Well, investment's no different, right? And a big part of the reason for that is simply because if you're used to being able to do financial analyses based on specific indicators, and I know from my time at Fox, when I had film projects broken down for me by our VP of Finance, it's astonishing how well tuned that model is, which is why you see Fast and the Furious Part 29, because they know for sure that they're going to make a margin and it's predictable, right? Games, if it's an unknown quantity, is far less so. And so my piece of advice to the investment community would, one, keep going. And number two, what I've seen be very successful recently as a number of months ago, if you look at the acquisition of Saber Interactive, for instance, the way that those groups went about it is hire people from the game industry, right? You hire senior people with real experience who've shipped titles, notably, in my view, who have a lot of experience in terms of how those games are modeled and also how they're produced, and then use them as your diligence analyses up front. Because if you try to wade into those waters without knowing what you're looking at, you could very well lose your shirt. And you don't want to do that. If you do it properly, there's enormous upside.
Yeah, totally agree with Mike. And on the opposite side of that is looking at it more from the film lens, and you've talked about it at the beginning of this, is the way, how much legs an IP starting as a video game or an e-game or whatever can have. Part of the hardest part with making an independent film, and I work a lot in that area, is the financing and distribution of that. They have to convince so many people of this money, and the incentive does go a part of it, but they have to have the rest of that money in place before they even can think of going for an incentive. And a big part of that is having an IP and having something that they feel is sellable. And it's so hard to go to them with an original idea. But if you go to a financier, even a traditional bank, and they understand the longevity and the legitimacy of an IP that maybe started as a game, that's insane. I've seen it happen hand over hand. That's why we're going to start seeing some independent films that are like Pac-Man and Frogger and like things like that, because people are taking these classic IPs, bringing them back, and people are like, oh, there's an audience there. There was an audience there. There's nostalgia there, and they totally play into it and they don't second guess it. So to Mike's point on like the front side, everything you said, and then the back side is like from a financing perspective of, hey, if somebody got in on the front end of this, it has legs that can go very, very far. Not just in this space of gaming, but film, comic books, anime, anything and everything. It can just spread all over the place. So it's an amazing thing.
Yeah, and I'd like to
Go ahead, Andrew.
I'd like to transition that to a great classic example of exactly what Ryan was talking about. We're talking about Blue Mammoth here. It actually started with two guys who worked for Todd, who left Todd because he'd inspired them so much. Started with friends and family money to build this Brawlhalla game. Got an outside investor to come in from the tech space, but someone who put the money in for them to grow. They got this game out, got this very successful. Ubisoft, this very large publisher, came in and bought them, expanded them more. Now they have not only their own IP, but they're putting SpongeBob SquarePants and all these other IP into it. So it's becoming this great mixing area for all these IPs to come together. Now you're wearing it around your neck. So just a classic example of how these small indie studios can grow into these great properties.
I think,
Allie?
yeah, as someone who's raising capital for our business, at the end of the day, I guess the big jump up around gaming was really around investment into esports teams. I'm seeing that a lot of that has died down significantly in terms of available funding for teams and going more into the IP because it is something that's sustainable and also shows monetization and capitalization. So, I think, and profitability, of course, right? So I think that in addition to that, I'll say one more thing around brand investment, because I think that the brands investing in gaming as a whole, I'm seeing that shift a good bit as well from esports, which is more like traditional sports investments, to more broadly gaming. Because I believe that, just like what Mike was saying, and also what Ryan was saying around, hey, these are the things that are more sustainable and monetizable.
I'll add for advice. My personal philosophy around gaming is it's closer to music, or around esports. It's closer to music than it is to sports. So it really could be called like e-music gaming or something like that, and it'd be closer. And a lot of that comes from, a lot of the games, as I said, I think that when they're released, they can have a lot of hype around them. They can have a huge audience, and then over time, there's definitely enthusiasts that'll kind of keep something. It could keep it alive forever, really. If you have 25,000 people playing your game, that's a lot of people playing your game. But when the broader audience is 3 billion, you're not really capturing a lot of the market, right? And so I think focusing on what the future of gaming looks like, in my opinion, gaming continues to go up and up and up because of accessibility. As things become more accessible in gaming, it automatically you're kind of going to start to see more of that happen. People are getting more accessibility to PCs. They're becoming a lot cheaper to be able to get. Gaming is on your phone now, right? Like all kinds of games on your phone. Consoles are getting, kind of cheaper. I guess it depends on who you ask. But then games also are going in a cheaper route, becoming free. And so accessibility is kind of at an all-time high, and I think it's going to continue to go up. And that accessibility brings the next frontier, if you will, bringing it back to music. When a studio used to cost to create music, it cost $50,000 to create a studio. Now you can kind of create a studio on your phone. Gaming is going in that same direction. You can develop a game with just one person, and utilizing AI, and so accessibility to creating games is going to an all-time high, and game creation is going to an all-time high. And I think that next level is going to be the marketing around those games, and that's kind of what our specialty becomes.
Sure. All I was going to say, just speaking directly to the investment community, is it's important to understand a lot of the deals that you see that get press right now tend to be enormous deals. Those are the ones that get screen time if it's on LinkedIn or whatever it is. You see Savvy Games Group picked up Scopely for north of $4 billion, or you see Sabre that I was adverting to recently picked up by Aleph and another partner whose name escapes me for $500 million. You also look at the investment amounts that are talked about when you look at big console video games these days, $200 million, $300 million. But the reality is, and I think we're beginning to see that transition in the games industry now, we're living increasingly in a world where what I would call AA and AA plus level publishers have enormous opportunity. And what I mean in practical terms for the investment community by that is, there are so many different plays that you can make at sort of 20, 25, $30 million. And the advantage of doing that, especially you're seeing groups now creating funds, the advantage is that you can hit and miss at those levels, because even games that aren't going to do very well, you're probably going to make your original investment back, plus some, just not as much. Whereas if you're taking a $200 million bet and it goes south on you, you're literally gonna shut down, right? So that's the beauty of the newly emerging game industry now.
All right. So any investors see these people at the break? A lot of people raising capital. Good place to place your bets. Maybe not everyone's an investor. Most people are probably either parents or students or both. And so I'm going to mix it up on you. We're going to hit the parents first. Some of you are parents. So, every household, most households, someone's 13, they're playing a lot of video games. Maybe they want to be a pro gamer. This happened with both of my kids. I will share my answer. What do you say? What do you say to that parent who's like, my kid is on Fortnite and wants to be a pro gamer? Is that happening to some people out there? Okay, yes, there are some hands. All right, Allie, you can start.
Yeah, I think I literally told people before that I told my kid that she had to play at least 2 hours a day if she expected to become any good.
So you actually assigned homework, if
Absolutely.
I remember right at the time.
Yes.
You basically said you have to play this much video games.
Yeah, if you really want to get good, you have to actually play. So don't go outside and touch grass. Go back to your room and play video games.
All right.
Yeah, I think at one point people were saying, why are you always outside dribbling that basketball? Like, it was a game, right? It wasn't a career path. It wasn't a career choice. And I think that gaming is going to experience that same thing where people don't necessarily believe in it, but I think the kids that do, you should support them 100%. If they believe in it and they want to be it, then they can. It's just going to come down to the work ethic. Hopefully a parent like Allie doing homework assignments, that type of stuff is great. And monitoring it and making sure that, at the end of the day, every game genre is teaching different things. And so your child may be fond of pattern recognition and memorization and button mapping, which is just fighting games, right? And so understanding that they're learning those things, whereas shooting games are hand-eye coordination and spatial awareness and target tracking. These are different skills that they're learning within the game, and I think that should be celebrated, understanding that we're not going away from digital. I think digital is here to stay, and so it's important that we utilize the tools that are already created to start to foster the next generation of people.
Yeah, it's fascinating how many of both the soft skills and the hard skills that are now essential for the 21st century are really born out of both gaming and game development. Gamers learn teamwork. We saw the Army coming in the 90s, military in general, recruiting out of gaming guilds online because these were the kids who already knew leadership. They could set up a raid, work a team together. They were born sergeants and officers right off the bat, and they could just come in with skill sets that the military otherwise couldn't get entry level and had to spend lots of time and money to teach. In game development, we see not just things like Unreal being used in film, but we see our user experience experts and user interface experts and community managers all being pulled out of the industry and being gobbled up by Fortune 500 companies. Home Depot, UPS are grabbing our GGDA members on a regular basis to come work internally. So, in the GGDA, we love kids to play games. We want them making them as well. My daughter made her first game when she turned 4, but she set it aside for playing them for a while. So hopefully that'll inform the next game she makes. But it is amazing, really, how many of the skills we're seeing employers want, the programming, the design skills, and what people in general want, the teamwork, how to deal with the people, being informed by their experience with games. We don't even speak to how the military designs its drones to work like games.
I can just my kids are so young, it's hard for me to say. They can barely get their hands around the controller, but I can't play the fighting games, at least not all of them in front of them, but I'm obsessed with a card game that I have on my phone, Marvel Snap. I don't know if anybody plays Marvel Snap.
Love that game.
I'm obsessed with it, and I was showing my daughter, she sees me play it, she was asking how it works, and I was showing her, you do this and it adds 4, and you do this and it -2, and I just didn't realize, I'm showing her math, it's just simple math and subtraction on that stuff. So when I was growing up, it was always like you're melting your brain if you're playing this stuff, the original NES Mario generation. And now I just love the fact that it's it can be a de-stressor, it can be a stressor, it can be a way to build a career, or it could just be something as a hobby. So I love the way that it's turned out, to be honest.
Can I add to that real quick? Which is just, I have a 4-year-old as well, and I think to the point that was made earlier, just about the idea that games are no one thing. My daughter uses this educational software when she has spare time called ABC Mouse, and it's highly gamified. I mean, if you've got young children and you don't know about it, please check it out because it's great. I'm in no way affiliated with them. But there's a whole other spectrum of games for young children as well, which are fantastic. It's a little old for my daughter, although she's struggling with it right now on the console, which is called Children's Sky of Light. And then there's also the tie-ins with real conventional children's television programming. So if you look at Paw Patrol, Bluey, Peppa Pig, the games that are made for those, I think they're all made by the same company, frankly. I believe they're over in the UK. But they're fantastic. I mean, you literally feel like you're playing the TV show. And the final point that I would make, which is just useful to know, because I'm one of those people that's been in the game industry long enough that I remember, to the points that you were making, when video games were vilified for every social evil imaginable, right? And the reality is now, and it doesn't take much research to reinforce this idea, there is extremely concrete research, bulletproof research from very reputable universities that demonstrate conclusively that playing video games is really good for kids. It neuropsychologically stimulates them in a way which is highly beneficial. And I think the other aspect of it is, all the points that Titus was making. And in addition to that, what people forget, and I think that comes of the generational lag around believing that if you're playing a video game, somehow you're in a bubble. But in addition to all those very practical skills you're developing, there's incredible social networking and bouncing your personality off people who are from different cultures, from different nationalities, even who speak different languages potentially. And it's incredibly beneficial.
I agree with all of that, but one contradiction: some of the best PBS Kids games were made here in Atlanta by Primal Screen, especially the Daniel Tiger stuff. And unfortunately, their lead just retired and shut it down. But some of the best, the ones my daughter loved the most, were made here.
I'd like to add, I actually just did a talk for entrepreneurs around gamifying your business. And so when we're talking about workforce development, we're talking about how, we're encouraging more kids to play video games. It also ties in to the workforce, right? When you're looking at gamifying what you're doing as a business, you're actually creating opportunities for efficiencies and productivity that you might not necessarily think of comes from a gaming background.
Yeah, my kids learned a lot from Minecraft. By my son, they know how to what items to put together in order to create things from Minecraft. My son beat Mario Odyssey when he was like 3. And now he understands how to spell Mario and skeletons, and he's 4 now. But he learned he didn't learn that from me. He learned it from playing these games, and he understands what enter looks like, and you can spell Power Rangers, and so it's like, who is teaching him these things? But he really enjoys gaming. and he's learning a lot while playing them. So I've seen it firsthand with all of my kids that they learned a lot from gaming.
I love all those perspectives. Yeah, you see everyone got real passionate. I mean, there's nothing like inside your household. And when you work in gaming, I mean, I certainly believe almost everything is better with gaming. Workforce development, better with gaming. Education, better with gaming. Learning to be an entrepreneur, better with gaming. Want to do tech? Gaming makes a lot of things better. So anyway, all right, we hit parents. Let's hit students. So we might have some students that want to work in the gaming or esports industry. There's a lot of workforce development opportunities here locally in Georgia, so I guess it'll be an option for everyone. You can talk about broadly tools available to them in Georgia, or you can just give one specific tip for someone that wants to break into the game industry. Anyone who wants to go first, Mike?
I'll do the one discrete tip, which is network. You know, the game industry is terrible at getting people in because there's this bizarreness about how do you get into video games? Well, you need to have experience in video games. Well, how do I get that experience? Well, you need to have the experience, right? And it's a circularity that makes you insane. The way you bypass that is literally reach out to people like me on LinkedIn. Some people are going to ignore you necessarily. That's the nature of the human condition. But there are people like me out there who are in senior executive positions who will respond to you and have conversations with you. So do it. Be courageous and reach out and network. It's the single biggest piece of advice I could give you.
A major part of why Georgia added interactive productions to the Entertainment Investment Act was because we saw this dramatic brain drain going on here. All these incredibly talented students from our colleges, all of them, were heading out west because there was no game industry here. So when we implemented the tax incentives, we now have more than 20 colleges around the state with game development and related programs here. Kennesaw State says that their game development program is the fastest growing program in the entire history of the university. This is how we get kids into technology now, why they study any of this stuff. And we're very happy now that we're keeping them here. So the big difference is if you're going to DreamHack this weekend, I hope you are, right over at the World Congress Center, we have an indie playground there with 60 indie studios showing off their work, about half of whom are Georgia studios. So if you're going to DreamHack, check it out. If you're not, use the code GGDA15 for 15% off your ticket.
I'll add in there that if you all were listening to the FinTech talk earlier and the Georgia FinTech Academy, there's actually a Georgia Film Academy that has an esports track. And so esports, just like, and gaming, just like any other industry out there, has a multitude of verticals. I mean, when you look at and opportunities for work, right? So game developers need accountants. They also need marketing people. They also, it's not just sitting behind a desk playing video games. It's every job imaginable as with every industry. And so I will give props to Skillshot around creating some of this programming and curriculum that helps these kids develop skills for production, anything that you can tie into entertainment. And so I think that those opportunities as they exist, once again, big props to Atlanta for creating these programs, help to develop that ecosystem even further.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. In terms of there's accountants that work there and all. There's a whole behind the scenes thing. We see it with film and with digital, with gaming, where they're like, we don't want to give these tax incentives to just Brad Pitt, the naysayers, they say that. And same deal with gaming. We don't want to give this just to this game. Nintendo doesn't need our money. They don't understand that money, that tax money, is actually going back to not just people on the back end. It's engineers. It could be carpenters for stage setup. It's accountants. It's people doing the budgeting. It's editing. It's colorist. It's artist. So I think that, to be a part of this industry, you don't have to necessarily just be like, oh, well, I'm not a gamer, so I can't be, but I recognize the industry as a whole. There's a lot of positions that are there that you could work in that don't just fall into grab a controller and go,
Great. And thanks for the shout out. Skillshot did add some of the gaming and esports expertise, but what I will give props to is the state of Georgia for having this structure. So again, FinTech talked about it, and I forget, one of the panelists mentioned this idea that you could be enrolled at Kennesaw but take a class from Georgia State. And that same structure existed with film before games through the Georgia Film Academy. And that there is no other state, to my knowledge, that does this. And so the fact that, number one, you can take classes from a number of universities, but probably even more important for GFA, you're actually taught at an industry location by an industry working professional. So in the case of film, you go to Trilla Studios and you learn makeup with people that are doing makeup on the Black Panther, and you use special effects by the people that are doing special effects on the other DC or Marvel movie they're shooting there. And you're working in a film studio. And same for esports and gaming, you get to come to Skillshot, come to some other industry locations, Access back in the day, and you're taught by people that are doing this every day. So that is props to Georgia for innovating and tying industry to workforce in a really tangible way. So we hit parents, we hit students. Let's make sure we hit the theme of the conference, which is what's next. And so I would say for your own companies, and also if you have a thought on what is next for the gaming or esports industry in general, just put on a crystal ball and project what people have to look forward to. Who wants to take that first? Michael, you got it?
I won't in any way pretend to speak super knowledgeably about esports, except to say that what I do know for a fact is that there's massive capital moving into esports now. It has struggled over the years, and it's always been something which, in my opinion, was deeply frustrating because there's so much upside in it. And I think it's going to come into its own in the next decade, unquestionably. With regard to what I would call more conventional game development, which is what I do, it goes back to what I was talking about before. I think what you're going to see as the default in the next decade or so is going to be media ecosystems. And studios are already making efforts to do that. I can tell you from personal knowledge that Disney is in process. Fox was nibbling at the edges, but imperfectly. But the idea is that right from the initial inception of a project, you're thinking film, TV, video game, board games, publishing, and you're looking at this as a continuum through time where you've got your tentpole releases, which historically were always feature films, but now in the world of gaming might be a big PC console video game release, and then interstitial moments. And to the point that you made before, what you get out of that from a financial perspective is an incredibly long tail. You can get 20 years out of that with all types of different engagement, all of which are increasingly leveraged by technology, interconnected. So that's what I think is coming.
I'll add that I believe I read a stat the other day, 98% of Gen Alphas and Gen Zs play video games. And also with the advent of more games being built on mobile, it's not just about PC gaming anymore. It's not, I mean, from a global standpoint, mobile gaming is really where a lot of the developers are going to, right? That Scopely deal, that's for Monopoly Go. Right? Like that's for a game on your phone that you check in the morning while you're having coffee. Like it's not the esports trilogy. It's more along the lines of just the unifier of gaming in general.
Yeah, I think gaming is just going to continue to become more and more accessible. And so I think with that accessibility and the ability to develop, which I touched on earlier, the ability to just develop a game. I think it was EA that just showed their AI platform where they can develop a game just by saying what they want it to be, and then it kind of puts that game together, and you can create your own storylines very easily and your own. I think that will continue to grow, and the ability to develop and create will kind of come from a place that, if you have a brain, you can develop a game. And so I think that with that accessibility, I think marketing will become kind of the key thing in gaming and esports, because when everybody is there, it's like who becomes the Netflix or the Spotify or Apple Music or Uber, right? Like they didn't necessarily own the IP, but they had a community and they were able to market to that community very easily. And so I think that, shamelessly, the leaders in that will be the ones that kind of take on the next frontier of gaming.
When I started making games, we thought of game development being in California, Japan, and Washington State, and nowhere else. And that has dramatically changed. I mean, obviously, I love Georgia's growth story, but this is worldwide now. The Saudis, and this is true for esports as well, UP West Coast, Asia, now it's everywhere. The Saudis are putting tens of billions of dollars of their sovereign wealth fund into game development and esports. The EU has made promoting game development integral to its progress for the next decade. We're seeing this in Africa. I already mentioned Lagos. Kenya's got a great game development scene. Egypt used to put on some of the biggest game jams in the world. Vietnam, Flappy Birds became a phenomenon. That was out of Vietnam. So I'm very excited, not just by the growth of gaming here in Georgia, but globally how game development is growing. We've seen this dramatic growth of game dev. But as we start getting games made all over the world, that's just going to incentivize the people who live there to play more, enjoy more, be more creative, spend more, but enjoy this process even more. And the growth just has so much further to go.
Yeah, I agree. The growth is insane. I think it's only going to go up, just echoing what this panel said. From my perspective, working with in the past clients like Twitch directly and ESL and seeing how far they've come with just regards to like the payroll that they're putting up and how many people they're paying and the type of people that they're paying is absolutely insane. I think we're going to see more and more clients and production companies and video game companies doing that and getting bigger in scale. And they all started somewhere, right? So I do love still seeing these companies that start on Kickstarter and then to see where they go. But I love to see that growth. And then to your point, once again, talking to many states, I talked to all the states about their tax incentive programs, and this is heavily on the radar. So Georgia is the epicenter of it for sure, but other states are going to try to copy it. What do they say? That's flattery, right? that they're trying to copy it, but you will see other states start to try and grab this industry because it is a great one and only getting bigger.
Those were all great points. I mean, Allie, you mentioned the stat on Gen Z, and so one of the most interesting and positive points is that with each generation that you look at, a higher percentage is spending a higher percentage of their leisure time consuming games, right? So it might be like 65% of there's millennials, then there's 70% Gen X, and then when you go to Gen Alpha, it's like 95% basically that consider themselves a gamer, and they're just shifting a lot of their entertainment from more traditional to interactive. And that's the key thing about our industry is you can't be passive. It's not like reading a book. It's not like watching a movie. What defines a game is you have to lean in. You're the protagonist, which is why it's so applicable. All right, I'm going to give everybody one shout-out plug opportunity just because you took your valuable time here. So, and then I'll end with one as well, and then we'll thank our audience for the attention. So I'll start at the end, just any short kind of plug shout-out you want.
Sure. So once again, I work for Wrapbook. And we're doing and providing an amazing accounting and payroll platform for projects big and small, for esports, for video games, movies, television, interactive, you name it, we work with it. And it's an all-in-one platform. I work with people on their budgets. I help them navigate these incentives that we're talking about. Where's a good place for them to go? So looking forward to talking to you and expanding that relationship and seeing if I can help you with payroll and the incentives.
I don't know how to plug my projects during panels. I'm going to skill that. All right, so ggda.org, that's the Georgia Game Developers Association website. Go there and you'll scroll down, you'll find what's going on at Siege. Come to DreamHack, we have a booth there. Learn everything that's going on. DreamHack's going to be an amazing experience, but make sure you come to the Esports Summit at Skillshot first.
You can check us out at uelesports.com. We have our 9th season going on now for over $1 million. And shout out to Skillshot and Ghost Gaming for being a part of that. And we're super excited to continue to grow the esports scene.
If you're interested in joining our community, it's thegamehers.com. That's thegamehers.com. You like my little plug? Anyway, download our app, join the community, find out resources, get educated, learn some entrepreneurship. If you want to be an ally, please join us. We can't do it without everyone's help. Thank you.
Two quick ones. One is keep your eye on Daybreak Games and Coldiron Studios. There's a bunch of interesting things coming down the pipe with us over the next couple of years. And personally speaking, as I said, my daughter just started pre-K 4 here in town, and my wife has told me candidly that she's going to be at that school until grade 12. So I'm here for the foreseeable future. If there's anybody listening to me now or watching this streaming later, please reach out to me on LinkedIn. I appear exactly as I do on the screen, and if you have questions or you want to make contact or whatever it is, I'm totally available to that.
Awesome. I am a prolific LinkedIn poster myself, so you can follow me at Todd Harris. This amazing event that Sarah put on kicks off Games Week Georgia. There's an entire week of professional development and giving back to Atlanta Public Schools and talking about creators, and it's just one thing right after another. So find any of us and we will tell you about that. And this weekend is DreamHack Atlanta. Who's going to DreamHack currently? Okay, that is about a third of the room. The rest of you can go for free because of a partnership that we've hooked up that we're happy that Sarah is a part of. So we will have at this conference one free 3-day pass to DreamHack for everybody here to check it out. If you have not been to a gaming conference, all of the yapping, as the kids say, is great, but you really need to see it for yourself. 3 days, tens of thousands of people, take a music festival, apply it to gaming. It will return to Atlanta for year 6. Let's help make them successful. So with that, we will conclude our panel. I'm going to hand it to Sarah.
Everybody, I want to give you a housekeeping note. We are going to break for lunch. Food to the left, food to the right. And please be back here by 1:15. And do me a favor, give this incredible panel a big round of applause.
The lovely Melissa has your key to DreamHack for free. Thanks for coming. Thanks for your attention.